You know, there are things that mark us from an early age, and we don't even realize it. In my case, the weight of being the other, the one who was never good enough, followed me my whole life. I was always compared to Paula, my older sister. She was the perfect one, the one everyone admired, and well, I was just the other one. My mom didn't make any effort to hide it. Paula had the beauty I never had, and it wasn't just that. She was the smartest, the most caring, the best at everything. Me? Well, I tried, but it seemed like everything I did was insignificant. It didn't matter how many good grades I brought. Home? She always had a better story to tell, a bigger achievement. And do you know what it felt like? It felt like being invisible. I remember how bad it was when I tried to tell my mom about something cool I had done, and she'd just change the subject, as if I wasn't there, as if what I had to say didn't matter. I learned to fend for myself. At first, I tried to get attention in every way I could, but it didn't work. That's when I realized the only way I could feel useful, the only way to have something that was mine, was through studying. I threw myself into it. Not because I was a genius, but because it was the only place I felt like it was worth it. I knew that at least in books, I'd have a chance to be someone, to stand out in some way. Because, deep down, the only person I had to prove something to was myself. While Paula went on with her life, receiving compliments and admiring looks, I felt like I was part of a scene I didn't belong in. Like I was always in the background, observing. But at the same time, I didn't want to be her. I just wanted to be seen. I wanted someone, even if just for a moment, to look at me and say, "You did well, you're good enough." I guess in the end, I just wanted to be more than a shadow next to Paula, and in a way, my studies became my refuge, my shield. At least there, I could be someone. At least there, I could be myself, without comparisons, without other people's expectations. I didn't know it yet, but this search for recognition would shape my life in ways I could never imagine. But that's another story. Sometimes I wonder how everything turned out so differently between me and Paula, even though we were sisters. When we're kids, it's normal to compare what we have with what others have, but over time, things start to become clearer, right? And in my case, it became pretty clear that we were heading down completely different paths. While I was there, focused on work, trying to build my life, she always seemed to be drifting, aimlessly. Paula dropped out of college, didn't care about anything, and lived in a way that made me feel ashamed. Not that I was perfect, of course, but I had some kind of goal. I wanted more than just being Paula's sister, you know? I wanted to build a life for myself. And then, when things seemed to finally fall into place for me, Paula was always there, messing everything up, causing problems. She didn't have a steady job, lived off favors, depended on our parents for everything, as if it were normal. And honestly, it irritated me to see that. It was like life was just one big party, with no responsibility at all. While I was there, working hard, she was at parties or looking for some easy way out. The worst part was seeing Mom treat it like it was normal, as if it was fine for her to be irresponsible and still be treated like the wonderful daughter. I tried to distance myself, you know. I tried to focus on what I was doing and just ignore what was going on with her. The truth is, the more distant I became from my family, the more I felt like things were never going to change. I wasn't going to be the daughter my mom wanted. I wasn't going to compete with Paula. But I couldn't just accept the situation. I couldn't just ignore everything and keep pretending like everything was fine. The relationship between me and Paula, if you can even call it a relationship, was practically non-existent. There were no conversations, no connection, nothing. The truth is, from the beginning, we were always different. Not just in the way we were, but in the way we saw life. And me? I was trying to do everything right. Trying to be someone my mom didn't always see, but I knew I could be. And so I kept going with my life, thinking that maybe, one day, all of this would change. I kept waiting for some kind of sign that our relationship could improve, but it never came. And slowly I began to realize that maybe I needed to stop waiting and start living my life the way I wanted, without worrying about what Paula was doing, without caring about what my mom thought. I was starting to understand that my place, in fact, was never between them. My place was with myself. I never imagined that life would push me into a situation like this. The thing is, one day, Paula showed up at my door, out of nowhere. She was with two boys, my nephews, whom I barely knew. They had that look on their faces like they didn't understand what was going on, like everything was new to them. Paula looked at me like it was the most normal thing in the world and told me she was going on a trip with a guy she had met, a sugar daddy, and that I'd have to take care of the kids for a while. When I asked for how long, she simply answered, 8 weeks. What? 8 weeks? Me, who barely had time to take care of myself, was going to have to look after 2 little boys? I already knew what she was up to. I knew she was once again putting everything on my shoulders. I tried to refuse, said I couldn't do it. But of course, she had her tricks up her sleeve. It wasn't just a request, it was emotional blackmail disguised as a plea for help. "You're not going to leave them with anyone, are you?" she said in that tone, the one that made me feel like she was forcing me to accept. "Are you going to leave me to do this alone?" There was no way out. It didn't matter how much I argued. When she started playing that emotional game, using the right words to make me feel guilty, I knew I had no choice. I agreed, but not without a sense of anger. Once again, Paula was pushing me into a role I didn't want. Once again, I had to be the responsible one, while she did whatever she wanted. When she left, I brought the boys inside. They were scared, obviously. It wasn't every day that an aunt or uncle had to take care of you for so long, especially when your parents are like Paula. I watched those boys with a strange feeling. How can a mother just abandon her children without caring about what they feel? The boys weren't okay. They kept looking at the door as if expecting their mom to come back at any moment, but Paula wasn't coming back anytime soon. They didn't know that yet. And there I realized that I was stuck in a situation I had no idea how to fix. Because deep down, I knew I was doing something no one else wanted to do. I was taking on the responsibility that always fell to me, that always had. I didn't know how long I could handle it. But for now, I just thought one thing. I had to take care of them. Not for me, but for them. They couldn't be another victim of the life Paula chose for all of us. I don't know why, but every time I found myself in a tight spot, the first person I thought to turn to was my mom. Maybe because deep down, I still expected something from her. A word of support, a gesture that showed she was on my side, that I wasn't alone. But the truth is, over the years, I learned that my mom was never that person. When I went to her seeking help, I felt more rejected than ever. I told her everything, about the boys, about Paula's trip, about the pressure of having to take care of the kids while my sister was out there, living her life without a single responsibility. But instead of support, I once again found that indifference that had always bothered me. She looked at me with that disapproving stare, as if I were the one to blame for the whole mess. She accused me of being ungrateful, of not understanding, that Paula had the right to live her life, to chase her own desires. I tried to explain, I tried to make her see that it wasn't about that Paula was leaving everything to me, just like always. But she didn't want to listen. What she said in summary was, "You should be more understanding." It didn't take long for the conversation to escalate. I was furious, had no patience to be treated like I was the one in the wrong. My mom started minimizing Paula's behavior, as if it were normal, something any daughter would do. And me? I was there, taking care of her kids, trying to do what no one else seemed willing to do. The argument got ugly. I yelled, she yelled, and in the end, we didn't get anywhere. She said things that, honestly, I didn't think she was capable of saying. I was called insensitive, selfish, someone who never appreciated what my sister did. That conversation, instead of calming me down, left me more exhausted, more empty. That's when I truly realized that I was alone in this. Alone in the responsibility of taking care of the nephews, alone in the responsibility of keeping it together, even when no one else seemed to care. My mom was on Paula's side once again. And me? I wasn't anything to her. It didn't matter how much I tried, how much I worked to do the right thing. In that moment, I was angry. Angry for always being the one to hold the weight, the one who does the dirty work. Angry for always being the last choice. But it also became clear to me that deep down, I had no other choice. I had to keep going. I had to take care of those boys because no one else was going to do it for me. I never imagined that taking care of two little kids would be so complicated. But when Paula left me with the boys, I had no choice. I knew I couldn't just leave them, that I needed to make sure they were okay, even if it was way too much. My routine, which was already a mess, turned into chaos. I had my job, which demanded my attention, and now, all of a sudden, I had to be a mother, a babysitter, a therapist, all at once. The boys, with their lost looks, were as out of place as I was. They didn't understand what was happening, and I didn't know how to handle it. They were traumatized, feeling their mother's absence, and that reflected in everything. The oldest, Davi, was about 5 years old, and even though he was young, he could already sense something was wrong. He asked questions that tore me apart inside. "Will Mommy be back soon, Auntie?" I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say yes, but deep down, I knew their mother wouldn't be back anytime soon, if she ever would. It broke my heart. Laura, the youngest, at 3 years old, was completely lost. She didn't speak much, but her eyes said everything. She would sit on the floor, wrap herself in a blanket, and look at the door, as if her mom would walk in at any moment and everything would go back to normal. I felt like I was playing the role of a temporary replacement, and that weighed on me. I wasn't their mother. I didn't have that bond, but now I was there, trying to be what they needed. It wasn't easy, it wasn't natural, and I didn't know how to handle all of it. Besides trying to stay afloat at work, now I had to deal with traumatized kids. They cried at night, woke up in the middle of their sleep, asking for their mom. And me? All I could do was look at them and feel powerless. Because even though I knew I was trying to do the right thing, I didn't have the answers. I didn't have the experience they needed. I think the worst part was that I was so caught up in trying to give the best of myself to the boys that I didn't realize how much it was affecting me emotionally. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. When in the middle of the night I found myself trying to calm them down, I felt so much pressure on me, as if the whole world was watching, waiting for me to handle everything. But the truth was, I didn't know what to do anymore. I was as lost as they were, and in the meantime, Paula was over there, on the other side of the world, living her life. She sent occasional messages saying she was fine and that the boys were getting used to it. But I knew that wasn't the truth. They were far from getting used to it. I was trying to give them some stability, some comfort, but it wasn't easy. Every smile I saw on their faces was a victory, but also a reminder of how hard it was to try and fill the void that Paula had left. I knew that, deep down, they needed more than I could offer, and that made me even more anxious. It wasn't enough to just be good enough for them. I had to be enough to fill the hole that Paula's absence had left, and even when I did everything I could, I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I never imagined things would reach this point. I never thought my sister Paula, the same Paula who always shifted the responsibility onto me, would sink this low. But, as I learned over the years, Paula always has a way of surprising me. And this time, she surpassed any bad expectations I had of her. It was a quiet afternoon, and I was trying to give the boys a little bit of routine when I heard a noise at the door. Before I could move, she was there. Paula, with that defiant look, and she wasn't alone. A strange man accompanied her, and my mother was right behind them, wearing an expression that could only be described as complicit. Without asking, they barged into my house. It was as if the rules, the respect, everything I thought existed, didn't matter anymore. Paula wasn't there to apologize, to check on how her children were. She was there to simply take the kids back, as if I were an intruder, as if everything I had done was insignificant. The strange man who was with her looked just as lost as I felt, but still, he was there, ready to help Paula take the boys. My mother, instead of intervening, just stood by and watched. I didn't know if I was angrier at my mother or at Paula. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. Not only was I alone in this situation, but now I had to deal with the attitude of someone who should have been on my side. Camilla, step aside. They're my children. I decide what's best for them, Paula said with a tone that cut through me like a knife. And right there, in that moment, anger took over. I looked at my mother, hoping, I don't know, some sign that she would support me. But no. She stood there with her arms crossed, as if everything was normal, as if she wasn't seeing what was happening. I tried to argue, tried to speak, but the situation was already out of control. The man began to push the door, and that's when he touched me. A quick shove, but strong enough to make me lose my balance. I screamed, but what hurt the most was seeing the apathy on my mother's face, as if it were normal to barge into someone's house, assault them, and forcibly take the children. The feeling of powerlessness was indescribable. I knew I had to do something, that I couldn't let this happen, but my anger, my confusion, paralyzed me for a second. Paula was determined to take the kids, and suddenly I found myself with no options. She looked at me with that smile that, to be honest, looked more like mockery and said, "If you try to stop this, you'll regret it. Don't try." That's when I realized what Paula was doing wasn't just an impulsive act. It was planned, something she had orchestrated with my mother. And that man. The tension in the air was palpable, as if all the weight of everything I had lived up until that moment was crushing me. I knew I had to act, but my mind was foggy, mixing anger, despair, and fear. But with my heart pounding and not knowing what else to do, I grabbed my phone and started recording everything. The threats, the assaults, everything. I knew I couldn't let this pass without documenting it. I wasn't going to allow them to take the kids so cruelly. As Paula got ready to leave with the boys, I knew the worst was happening. They were taking the kids, but I wasn't going to let it end like this. Not without a fight, not without doing something to protect my nephews, who were being torn from their lives in such a brutal way. I didn't know what to expect when the police arrived. Part of me was still in shock, as if everything was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But when I saw the police cars parking on my street, when the officers got out and entered my house, with the seriousness the situation demanded, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It was as if, finally, I had someone on my side. Someone who could do what I couldn't do alone. Stop things from spiraling even further out of control. I spent the entire time waiting for news. They had taken the boys, and I knew I couldn't let it end there. Every minute felt like an eternity. I didn't know what they were doing with the children, where they were, and that ate me up inside. But at the same time, there was a part of me that refused to give up, that believed there was something I could do to bring the boys back. When the police called me saying the children had been located, the relief I felt was so intense that I could hardly believe it. They were at a motel with Paula and the unknown man. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but it was true. The police acted quickly, found the place, and finally brought the children back. I knew there was still a lot to be done, that the process was just beginning, but at that moment, I felt like, for the first time, things were heading in the right direction. The kids were safe, and that was all that mattered. The police did their job. Paula and the man were arrested, and with that, they couldn't harm anyone anymore. I learned that my mother had also been involved in the charges because there was no way to deny her role in the whole thing. It wasn't easy, but I knew she had to be held accountable too. Looking at the boys afterward, seeing that they were finally safe, felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The fight wasn't over, I knew that. But at that moment, I was certain I wasn't going to give up. I was going to be the person they needed, and together we would rebuild whatever was necessary. When the kids finally returned to my house, something inside me changed. It wasn't just the routine that was turned upside down, but my perception of what it meant to be responsible for someone, to be the person someone needs to feel safe. Deep down, I knew this was a responsibility I couldn't abandon, even if I wanted to. Now I was all they had. And, as scared as I was and unsure how to make everything work, I knew there was no turning back. The beginning wasn't easy. Davy and Laura were shaken, not just by the kidnapping, but by the sudden change. They were used to the idea that Paula was their mother, and suddenly they were in the care of someone they barely knew as a mother figure. The pain in their eyes tore at me, and their constant silence, which had once seemed normal, now was a reminder of how much that situation had affected their emotions. I found myself trying to create some routine for them, as if that would bring some kind of stability. But what I didn't know was that their routine was gone. What remained was constant fear, a feeling of insecurity that hung in the air. Sometimes Davy would ask if his mom was coming back, and all I could do was look at him and respond with what I hoped would be comfort, even though I wasn't sure of anything. "I don't know, Davy, but I'm going to take care of you and your sister, and you won't be alone." I knew it wouldn't be a quick change, and that no matter how much I tried to give my best, the trauma was there, and it wouldn't disappear with nice words or small gestures. It was something that would take time to heal. But still, there were moments when hope would rise amid the chaos. Laura, the youngest, was a mystery. She didn't speak much, but she observed everything. It was as if she tried to understand what was going on, but couldn't fully process it. Sometimes she would come close to me, hold my hand, and look at me with those little eyes full of insecurity. It was in those moments that I felt the weight of my responsibility. I didn't want to fail. I knew I couldn't fail. The nights were the hardest. I was used to the sound of my own quiet nights, but now the house was full of life, and the nights brought nightmares. Davy would wake up crying, asking for his mom. Laura would curl up under the covers, scared. And me? I was there, trying to be the foundation, trying to be strong, when the pain inside me didn't disappear either. It wasn't easy for me, too. I felt the weight of the responsibility, and at the same time, the fragility of the kids made me question if I would really be able to help heal them. But, little by little, with every smile I managed to get from them, with every moment when things seemed a little more peaceful, I saw that maybe I was making a difference. Not in the ideal way, not perfectly, but in a real way, with all the mistakes and successes. What I knew was that if I was honest with them, if I showed them I was there to protect them, to be the person they needed, things could, over time, get better. And, as difficult as it was, I started to realize that, amid all the confusion, there was something more. There was the chance to create something new. I was creating a family, not a perfect family, but one built with love, patience, and effort.